If you had told Zara Chen a week ago that humanity's first contact with an apex predator species would go spectacularly wrong, she would have asked if you wanted a cup of tea to go with that obvious statement. As she stood behind the counter of her quaint tea shop in London's Notting Hill, watching the news unfold on her tablet, she couldn't help but smirk at humanity's predictably chaotic response to the situation. The small brass bell above her shop door chimed as Mrs. Henderson, her most regular customer, hurried in with her gray hair in disarray. "Zara, dear, have you seen the news? Actual aliens. And they look like something out of Jurassic Park crossed with a bodybuilder." "Would you like your usual Earl Grey, Mrs. Henderson? Or perhaps something stronger for the apocalypse? I hear chamomile is lovely for calming the nerves during potential planetary invasions." Zara's deadpan delivery made the elderly woman chuckle, despite her anxiety. On the tablet screen, shaky footage showed the first Nexarian diplomatic vessel landing outside the United Nations headquarters. The aliens were impressive, to say the least 9-foot-tall reptilians with iridescent scales and muscles that would make a professional wrestler feel inadequate. Their delegation had emerged from their ship with what they later claimed were ceremonial weapons plasma rifles that just happened to be fully charged. Leave it to humans to see heavily armed lizard people and decide the best welcome would be to point even more weapons at them, Zara muttered, measuring out perfectly heated water over tea leaves. The UN security forces had reacted exactly as one might expect, and the resulting standoff had devolved into a diplomatic nightmare of historic proportions. Mrs. Henderson settled into her usual corner chair, clutching her teacup like a lifeline. "They say there are other alien species trying to warn us about these Nexarians. Apparently they've conquered 3 solar systems already." "Only 3? They must be slacking." Zara wiped down her counter with precise, methodical movements. "Though I suppose that's more impressive than humanity's current score of 0. The news feed switched to a panel of experts arguing about appropriate first contact protocols. A military general was red-faced, pounding his fist on the table as he demanded immediate defensive action. Next to him, a peace activist was suggesting we send them flowers and friendship bracelets. "Because nothing says welcome to Earth quite like threatening thermonuclear war," Zara commented to her collection of tea canisters. "Although I suppose the friendship bracelet crowd isn't much better. Do they even have wrists?" The following days brought a parade of failed diplomatic attempts. The Americans tried to demonstrate military might, which the Nexarians found amusing. The Russians attempted intimidation, which the Nexarians found even more amusing. The European Union proposed a complex series of trade agreements, which somehow resulted in the Nexarians believing we had offered them ownership of Jupiter. At this rate, Zara told her beloved teapot, a family heirloom painted with delicate cherry blossoms, "we'll be lucky if they decide we're too stupid to bother conquering." Her shop had become a strange oasis of calm in the growing chaos. While people stockpiled supplies and governments issued contradictory statements, Zara continued serving tea with the same precision and care she always had. The only concession she made to the potential end of human civilization was adding Apocalypse Blend to her specials board, a robust mix of black teas that she claimed would keep you alert during the invasion. As she closed up shop that evening, another news alert flashed across her tablet. The Nexarian High Command had apparently taken offense at something no one was quite sure what, and had threatened to demonstrate their species' superiority once and for all. "Brilliant," Zara sighed, flipping the shop's sign to closed. "I don't suppose anyone thought to offer them a proper cup of tea before threatening to blow them up." "No, of course not. That would be far too sensible." Little did she know that her sarcastic suggestion would soon prove prophetic in ways that would change the course of human-alien relations forever. But for now, she simply locked up, patted her teapot, and headed home, just another London shopkeeper watching the world gear up for war over what was probably just a massive misunderstanding. At least she had enough tea stockpiled to last through the apocalypse. Priorities, after all. It was, Zara decided, a perfectly proper British day for an alien to crash land near her shop, absolutely pissing with rain. The sound of screeching metal and emergency sirens barely registered over the thunderstorm raging outside. She was more concerned about whether the wet weather would affect her tea's steeping time. When her shop door burst open, bringing with it a gust of wind and a severely injured 9-foot reptilian warrior, Zara's first thought was that the creature was dripping all over her newly cleaned floors. "I don't suppose you thought to wipe your feet before bleeding all over my shop?" she asked, addressing the massive alien who was now sprawled across 3 of her favorite chairs. The Nexarian, sporting what appeared to be a nasty gash across its scaled chest, looked up at her with glowing amber eyes. It growled something in its native language that sounded like rocks being put through a coffee grinder. "I'll take that as a no." Then Zara sighed, reaching for her best teapot. "Well, since you're here and apparently not trying to eat me, would you fancy a cup of Earl Grey? It's my grandmother's special blend." The warrior stared at her, probably trying to determine if this was some elaborate human trap. Its translator crackled to life, spitting out broken English. "What is Earl Grey? Some form of weapon?" "Only against bad taste," Zara replied, already measuring out the perfect amount of leaves. "Though I suppose my gran did once use a teapot to fight off a burglar. Family legend says he never drank tea again." The Nexarian attempted to sit up straighter, wincing. "You offer sustenance to an enemy combatant." "Enemy combatant? Is that what you're calling yourself?" Zara raised an eyebrow, adding water heated to exactly 98 degrees Celsius. "Right now you look more like a very large, very wet lizard who's bleeding on my upholstery. Also, it's 4 o'clock, and I never skip afternoon tea. Would be terribly uncivilized." The warrior watched in fascination as she prepared the tea with practiced precision. "Your species shows no fear. This is unusual." "Oh, I'm terrified," Zara assured them, placing a delicate porcelain cup in front of the massive alien. "But my grandmother would come back to haunt me if I let anyone leave this shop without experiencing proper tea service, even if they are part of an invasion force. Do be careful, it's hot." The Nexarian picked up the tiny cup between 2 clawed fingers, looking rather like a giant trying to handle dollhouse furniture. They sniffed it suspiciously, then took a large gulp. What followed was perhaps the most spectacular tea-spitting incident in human history. "By the void," the warrior exclaimed, coughing and sputtering. "It burns." Yet not unpleasantly they stared at the cup with a mixture of horror and intrigue. "What manner of chemical warfare is this?" "That's bergamot oil, actually," Zara explained, calmly wiping tea spray off her counter. "Though I suppose it could be classified as chemical warfare, depending on who you ask. My ex certainly thought so. Would you like to try it again? Smaller sips this time, perhaps." The warrior nodded, now approaching the cup with the same caution they might show a small explosive device. This time they managed to take a proper sip, their scales shifting color slightly as they processed the new sensation. This is unprecedented," they muttered. "Our species has conquered vast systems, encountered countless alien substances, but never anything like this." "Wait until you try it with biscuits," Zara said, already reaching for her premium tin of shortbread. "Though we might need to find you a larger cup. That one looks like it might give you hand cramps." As she watched the fearsome warrior delicately nibble on a shortbread finger, Zara couldn't help but wonder if perhaps humanity had been going about this first contact business all wrong. Sometimes, she mused, all it took to bridge an interstellar cultural gap was a properly brewed cup of tea. "And maybe some biscuits for good measure, right then," Zara said, setting out her finest tea sets while her unexpected guest watched with fascination. "Before we discuss your ship smoking in the alley, I believe proper introductions are in order. I'm Zara Chen, purveyor of fine teas and apparently now an intergalactic barista." The warrior pressed a clawed hand to their chest in what appeared to be a formal gesture. "I am Thrix, third blade of the 7th Fleet, vanquisher of the Rigel system, terror of the Outer Rim," and they paused, looking somewhat embarrassed, currently very confused by your hot leaf water. "Hot leaf water," Zara clutched her chest in mock horror. "I haven't been this offended since an American tourist asked me for sweet tea with ice. Now pay attention, Thrix, terror of the Outer Rim, you're about to get a proper education in tea culture." What followed was perhaps the most unusual tea ceremony in human history. Thrix, still sporting bandages Zara had insisted on applying, hunched over her display counter like an oversized student at a tiny desk. "Now, this is Darjeeling, the champagne of tea," Zara explained, holding up a jar of loose leaves. "Not to be confused with actual champagne, which is an entirely different lesson I save for Thursdays." K-Thrix carefully sniffed the jar, their scales shifting to a lighter shade of green. It smells like the high mountains of Nexus Prime after the third moonrise. They paused, though we usually conquer the mountains rather than drink them. Of course you do, Zara muttered, measuring out portions. Have you considered that perhaps not everything needs to be conquered? Some things can simply be appreciated. The warrior's attempt to hold the delicate teacup between their massive claws was a sight that would have gone viral on social media had anyone been brave enough to record it. Like this ritual of yours, it seems unnecessarily complex. Says the species that apparently requires 3 different types of plasma weapons for a diplomatic meeting. Zara countered, adjusting K-Thrix's grip on the cup. No, don't crush it. It's been in my family for generations. Think of it as handling a what do you call those energy cores that power your ships? Stellar heart crystals. Yes, those. Handle it like one of those, except this is actually important. Over the next few hours, Zara introduced K-Thrix to a world tour of teas. The warrior was particularly taken with Lapsang Souchong. It tastes like victory, though they nearly destroyed a table trying to back away from a particularly strong pu-error by the void. It smells like that time we conquered the swamp moons of Betelgeuse. And this, Zara said, preparing her piece de resistance, is my special blend. Took me years to perfect. K-Thrix had gradually relaxed enough to coil their large frame onto a reinforced chair Zara had dragged out from storage. They now held their cup with surprising delicacy, though their tail occasionally knocked over a display when they got too excited about a new flavor. The compounds in these leaves, K-Thrix mused, examining the tea with their sophisticated optical implants. They're producing a remarkable calming effect. Our scientists would be fascinated. They better not tell them, Zara advised. They'd probably try to weaponize it. Though I suppose that would be an improvement. Instead of interstellar war, we could have interstellar tea parties. K-Thrix suddenly sat up straighter, nearly hitting their head on the ceiling. That's it. The solution to our current diplomatic impasse. Before Zara could respond, K-Thrix activated their communication device. The shop filled with holographic static before resolving into the stern face of what was clearly a higher-ranking Nexarian. Third Blade, K-Thrix, report your status and explain why you haven't destroyed the human establishment that's harboring you. High Commander, K-Thrix exclaimed, still holding their tiny teacup. I have made a remarkable discovery. The humans possess a ritual beverage that induces peace through voluntary chemical alteration of consciousness. It's served in ceremonial vessels that require extreme precision to handle, demonstrating both physical control and respect for tradition. They call it tea. Zara watched with growing amusement as K-Thrix attempted to explain tea culture to their bewildered superior. Terms like steep time and optimal water temperature were translated into military jargon, with tea cozy somehow being interpreted as tactical temperature maintenance device. And you believe this tea ritual could prevent war? The High Commander asked skeptically. With all due respect, Commander K-Thrix replied, how can we claim superiority over a species that has mastered the art of peaceful combat through expertly prepared hot leaf water? Our plasma cannons seem rather crude in comparison. Zara couldn't help herself. I don't suppose your fleet would be interested in a proper afternoon tea. I make excellent scones. The High Commander stared at her for a long moment. You would share your chemical peace rituals with us? Well, Zara said, already mentally calculating how much tea she'd need. It beats the alternative of planetary destruction. Though I should warn you, if any of you ask for coffee, all deals are off the next morning. Zara was just opening her shop when the sky over London turned into something out of a sci-fi catastrophe film. Massive Nexarian warships hovered over the city, their shadows casting most of Notting Hill into premature darkness. Well, she said to her teapot, I suppose I should have ordered more scones. While air raid sirens wailed and people ran screaming through the streets, Zara calmly flipped her sign to open and began setting up her largest tea service. K-Thrix, who had spent the night learning about different tea strainers, helped by moving tables together, occasionally knocking over displays with their tail. Your species appears to be panicking, K-Thrix observed, as another wave of screaming pedestrians ran past the shop window. Yes, they do that, Zara replied, arranging cups and saucers. Though I'd argue it's a perfectly reasonable response to having downtown London turned into a sci-fi movie set. Do you think your high command would prefer Earl Grey or English breakfast for their first cup? This is the sort of diplomatic faux pas that could restart the war. The shop's door chimed as Mrs. Henderson bustled in, seemingly oblivious to the chaos outside. "Morning, dear." "Oh, hello again, large lizard person. I'll have my usual and perhaps something for the enormous floating ships. They're blocking my television reception." Before Zara could reply, her shop's small street front was suddenly filled with the imposing presence of the Nexarian High Command. 7 enormous reptilians in ceremonial armor ducked through her door, led by High Commander Velax themselves. "I do hope you've wiped your feet," Zara said, eyeing their massive armored boots. "The floors were just cleaned." The High Commander blinked all 3 of their eyes. "You address the supreme military authority of the Nexarian Empire with concerns about floor cleanliness." "Well, someone has to," Zara replied, already pouring tea. "I noticed none of you thought to make a reservation. Fortunately, I always keep a few extra cups handy for potential alien invasions." Mrs. Henderson, still calmly sipping her tea in the corner, nodded approvingly. What followed was perhaps the most unusual diplomatic meeting in Earth's history. 7 of the galaxy's most feared military commanders crowded around Zara's tea tables, their elaborate armor scratching her chairs, while she explained the proper way to hold a teacup without crushing it. "No, High Commander, you can't just stab the scone with your claw. There's a proper technique. And please stop trying to dip your plasma sword in the tea. It's throwing off the temperature." Outside, military jets circled nervously, while news helicopters tried to figure out why the alien invasion seemed to have stopped for tea time. Inside, Zara was teaching the Supreme War Council of the Nexarian Empire about the importance of letting tea steep for the proper amount of time. "Fascinating," one of the commanders mused, carefully balancing a tiny teacup between their massive claws. "Your species uses this ritual for both peaceful gatherings and passive-aggressive conflict resolution." "Exactly," Zara confirmed, passing around a plate of biscuits. "Nothing says I acknowledge your existence but disapprove of your life choices, quite like a properly timed tea invitation. We've avoided at least 3 civil wars through strategic tea parties." Thrix, now proudly serving as unofficial tea ambassador, was explaining to their fellow warriors how different teas could affect one's mood. The chamomile is particularly effective for calming battle rage, and the oolong provides excellent mental clarity for strategic planning. Though perhaps Zara interjected, watching a commander attempt to add plasma energy to their cup, we should stick to traditional heating methods. I'm rather attached to this building not being vaporized. By the time the Prime Minister's emergency response team finally burst through the door, they found the entire Nexarian High Command engaged in a heated debate about the proper order of milk and tea in a cup. "Ah," Prime Minister Zara called out, noting his bewildered expression. "Perfect timing, we were just about to start negotiations. Would you prefer Earl Grey or Darjeeling? Though I should warn you, the High Commander has taken quite a liking to the Ceylon, and they're still armed." Mrs. Henderson, still in her corner, just smiled and asked for a refill. "You know," Velax remarked, carefully dunking a biscuit, "we came to demonstrate our species' superiority through military might, but I'm beginning to think we may have underestimated the tactical applications of baked goods." "Just wait until you try the cucumber sandwiches," Zara replied. "They've prevented at least 2 world wars. In the spirit of interstellar diplomacy." The Nexarians insisted on sharing their own ceremonial beverages. This led to what Zara would later describe as the most interesting health and safety violation my shop has ever hosted. "This is Rocky Juice," Thrix announced proudly, producing a container that seemed to be actively glowing, extracted from the predatory plasma flowers of our home world. Very traditional. Zara eyed the liquid, which was currently eating through one of her spare saucers. "How lovely. And do all your traditional beverages typically dissolve ceramics?" "Only the weak ones," High Commander Velax assured her. "The strong ceramics prove themselves worthy of containing the drink." The human delegation, which had grown to include several ambassadors and a very confused health inspector, watched in horror as the Nexarians demonstrated proper K-Raki drinking technique, which apparently involved roaring at the beverage to show dominance before consumption. Well, Zara mused, watching her fourth saucer dissolve. I suppose this explains why your species evolved such robust digestive systems. In return, human diplomats had begun arriving with tea varieties from around the world. The Japanese ambassador's ceremonial matcha presentation was particularly memorable, especially when K-Thrix attempted to perform a traditional bow and accidentally knocked over half the tea room with their tail. Fascinating, K-Thrix declared, now sporting a green-stained snout. Your species has developed dozens of ways to prepare leaf water, each with its own ritual significance. Though I still don't understand why some humans become so agitated about the milk question. This innocent observation sparked a fierce debate among the British delegates about the proper order of milk and tea. The argument grew so heated that the Nexarians began taking notes on human combat techniques. You see, one commander observed, they established dominance through passive-aggressive comments about brewing methods. Most efficient. The greatest cultural misunderstanding occurred when someone attempted to explain bubble tea to the Nexarians. The concept of deliberately putting chewy objects in a drink led to a 3-hour discussion about whether humans had evolved from a species of aquatic predators. But why would you hunt the small black spheres if they provide no nutritional value? Velax demanded. It's for fun, Zara explained, watching K-Thrix attempt to spear a tapioca pearl with a claw. Though I'm beginning to think we should have started with something simpler, like chocolate digestives. Meanwhile, the global media was having an existential crisis trying to report on the situation. Headlines ranged from alien invasion halted by tea time to local shop owner defeats space armada with bergamot oil. One particularly frustrated news anchor was attempting to explain the diplomatic breakthrough we're receiving reports that the feared Nexarian war fleet, conquerors of 3 solar systems, are currently taking a tea appreciation course in Notting Hill. This can't be right. K-Thrix had fully embraced their role as tea ambassador, giving passionate speeches about the strategic importance of proper steeping times. They had even started wearing a custom-made apron over their battle armor, though it barely covered their chest plate. You see, they explained to a group of bemused military generals, the humans have weaponized hospitality. Their tea ritual creates a space where violence becomes socially impossible. It's brilliant tactical thinking. Zara, restocking her rapidly depleting tea supplies, couldn't help but smile as she watched a group of Nexarian warriors carefully practicing how to stir their tea without clinking the spoon against the cup. Your species continues to surprise us, Velax admitted, now expertly handling their 4th cup of Darjeeling. We came expecting warfare and found wisdom in what you call elevenses. That's the thing about tea, Zara replied, sliding a fresh plate of scones onto the table. It has a way of making even the most terrifying space lizards seem civilized. Though I do wish you'd stop testing the biscuits' worthiness by throwing them against the wall first. But how else will we know if they're strong enough to dunk? K-Thrix asked, perfectly serious. Mrs. Henderson, still in her usual spot, just nodded sagely and asked for another cup. The day of the peace treaty signing dawned bright and clear, which Zara found slightly disappointing. Hardly proper British weather for such an occasion, she muttered, arranging commemorative teacups. Her small shop had become the unlikely center of galactic diplomacy. Representatives from 24 alien species crowded the space, many of them struggling to understand how the fearsome Nexarian empire had been pacified by what they kept referring to as leaf-based mind control. I still don't understand a floating crystalline being whispered to its neighbor. We tried everything: advanced weaponry, complex trade agreements, interpretive dance. Sometimes Zara interjected, sliding a cup of green tea their way. The simplest solutions are the best, though I'd love to hear more about the interpretive dance later. The peace treaty itself was being written on specially treated paper that could withstand both human ink and Nexarian plasma signatures. K-Thrix, now sporting a custom-made tea master's apron over their battle armor, was carefully explaining to the assembled diplomats why the document signing needed to be accompanied by a proper tea ceremony. The strength of the brew reflects the strength of our commitment, they announced solemnly, while demonstrating the correct way to warm a teapot. Several Nexarian warriors nodded appreciatively, their ceremonial armor now adorned with tea-related insignias. By Commander Velax, who had developed a particular fondness for Earl Grey, signed the treaty with one claw while perfectly balancing a cup and saucer with the other. In recognition of this historic moment, they announced the Nexarian Empire will establish the first intergalactic tea house in the Orion Arm. We shall call it Steep in Peace. That's terrible, Zara whispered to Kathrix. I know, they whispered back. We wanted to call it the Imperial Leaf Junction, but were outvoted. The Earth's diplomatic corps, still looking slightly shell-shocked by the whole affair, presented Zara with her official appointment as Earth's first tea ambassador to the galaxy. The ceremony was briefly interrupted when someone offered the Nexarian delegation coffee, causing a minor diplomatic incident that was quickly resolved with emergency scones. We're still not entirely sure how this happened, one unofficial admitted to a reporter. 1 minute we were facing interstellar war. The next we're discussing the proper ratio of jam to cream on scones with 9-foot-tall lizard warriors. Kathrix, meanwhile, had founded the Nexarian Tea Appreciation Society, which quickly became the most feared and respected cultural organization in 3 solar systems. Their monthly meetings were legendary, particularly after they incorporated traditional Nexarian combat rituals into tea ceremony practice. The key, Kathrix explained to their eager students, is to show the tea respect while also asserting dominance. But please stop trying to intimidate the chamomile, it's counterproductive. As the ceremony concluded and the various diplomats filed out, Mrs. Henderson remained in her usual corner, calmly sipping her tea. Well done, dear, she said to Zara. Though I do hope this doesn't mean you'll be changing your regular hours. Zara looked around her shop, now bearing the marks of both Earth and Nexarian culture plasma scorch marks next to vintage tea advertisements, ceremonial weapons hanging beside tea strainers, and a sign reading "No plasma testing during tea time." You know, she said to Kathrix, who was carefully arranging their new collection of Earth tea varieties in order of caffeine content, when I opened a tea shop, I thought the worst I'd have to deal with would be tourists asking for Starbucks. Speaking of which, Kathrix replied, we've received 17 declarations of war from other species demanding to know our tea secrets. Shall I put the kettle on? Zara sighed and reached for her best teapot. Better make it a large pot. Saving the galaxy is thirsty work.